proving my wife's affair on New Year's Eve and exacting revenge. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. As the crowd chanted 10, 9, my finger hovered over the button that would destroy my wife's life. 50 of our closest friends and family were packed tightly into our expansive living room, wearing stupid sparkly hats, blowing noisemakers, and holding glasses of ridiculously expensive champagne. My wife, Chloe, was standing right in the center of the room, looking like an absolute angel in a tight silver dress, laughing with her head thrown back. Next to her was Julian, my business partner and the man I considered a brother. He had his hand resting just a little too comfortably on her lower back. They thought I was adjusting the projector for the Times Square ball drop broadcast. They thought I was the same oblivious, trusting idiot I had been for the last 5 years of our seemingly perfect marriage. For half a decade, I genuinely believed I had won the lottery. Chloe was charismatic, brilliant, and possessed the kind of magnetic beauty that made people stop and stare wherever we went. We had built an incredible life together in a gorgeous, fully tech-integrated house in an upscale, snowy suburb. I was the loyal, maybe slightly too methodical husband, working grueling late-night hours to build a successful company with Julian so that Chloe could live the luxurious lifestyle she felt she deserved. I gave her absolutely everything. I trusted her completely and without hesitation. The illusion she created was flawless. It is genuinely terrifying how easily you can be blind to the truth when you are looking at someone you unconditionally love. You ignore the small, nagging things. You justify the glaring inconsistencies because the alternative, that the person sleeping in the bed next to you is a total stranger, is far too painful to accept. But once that blindfold slips, even a fraction of an inch, the blinding light of reality burns your eyes. The transition from a devoted, happy husband to the cold, calculating man standing in the shadows by the smart TV tonight didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, agonizing descent into a personal hell, paved with intricate lies, vicious gaslighting, and the ultimate betrayal by the two people I trusted most. I didn't just want a quiet divorce. I wanted absolute, undeniable ruin. I pressed the enter key, knowing there was absolutely no turning back now. It started in late October, just as the first snow began to dust the suburbs. For years, Chloe and I had a comfortable, predictable routine. But suddenly, there was a subtle, chilling shift in her behavior. The most glaring change was her phone habits. She used to leave her device lying around anywhere, on the kitchen counter, the sofa, the bathroom sink. Now, it was permanently fused to her hand. If she left the room, the phone went with her. I noticed the screen was always placed face down. When I casually asked her about the sudden change, she laughed it off, claiming she was just reading a lot of depressing news and didn't want to bring down the mood. Then came the sudden dedication to fitness. Chloe had never been a gym enthusiast, preferring light yoga at home. Out of nowhere, she joined a high-end fitness club across town. "I just need a change of pace, Liam," she told me, packing a sleek new gym bag. These sessions always seemed to happen late in the evening, right when I was winding down from work. She would return home hours later, smelling faintly of expensive body wash rather than sweat, her mood unusually elevated. I tried to bring it up one evening while we were cooking dinner. "You've been spending a lot of time at that new gym, Chloe. We hardly see each other at night anymore. Is everything okay?" She dropped the knife she was holding, the metallic clatter loud in the quiet kitchen. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing into a sharp, condescending glare. "Are you seriously doing this right now, Liam? Are you really that insecure?" "I'm not insecure," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I just miss my wife." "Well, your wife is trying to be healthy," she snapped, crossing her arms defensively. "Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your spreadsheets and your boring routine, you'd understand what it's like to actually want to improve yourself. Don't project your own stagnation onto me." Her words stung, deflecting the issue entirely and making me feel like a suffocating, jealous partner. I apologized, backing down immediately, eager to restore the peace in our home. But my apology couldn't erase the awful, sinking feeling in my chest. A few days after the kitchen argument, the seed of doubt finally took root. I was sitting on the living room sofa, reading a book, while Chloe was in the shower. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Out of pure habit, I glanced over. The screen lit up, displaying a locked screen notification. It wasn't a text message. It was a notification from a hidden vault app, disguised to look like a standard calculator. I only recognized it because Julian had jokingly mentioned using something similar to hide his cigar purchases from his current girlfriend. Before I could process what I was looking at, the screen went black. When Chloe emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, I casually mentioned the buzz. Your phone lit up. Looked like a calculator app notification. She froze for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Oh, just a spam email, she said smoothly, snatching the phone and slipping it into her robe pocket. The lie was so effortless, so casually delivered, that it made my blood run cold. That same evening, Julian came over for our weekly dinner. He and I had started our tech consulting firm 5 years ago, and he was a permanent fixture in our house. Usually, Julian was stressed, complaining about clients or deadlines. But tonight, he was practically vibrating with a strange, arrogant confidence. He poured himself a generous glass of my best scotch and lounged on the sofa, watching Chloe as she moved around the kitchen. Dinner smells incredible, Chloe, Julian called out, his voice dripping with a weird, familiar charm. Only the best for my boys, she replied, flashing him a brilliant smile that didn't quite reach her eyes when she glanced at me. As the night wore on, I noticed the micro-interactions. A lingering look over the rim of a wine glass. The way Julian laughed a little too hard at her unfunny jokes. I tried to brush it off as my own paranoia acting up again, fueled by that weird calculator app notification. They were just friends. We were a family. I was overthinking everything because I was stressed about work. I forced myself to ignore the alarm bells ringing in my head, pouring myself another drink to drown them out. I desperately wanted to believe that my mind was just playing cruel tricks on me. The dam finally broke the week before my 34th birthday. The temperature had dropped, so I went into the hall closet to grab Chloe's heavy winter coat to have it dry cleaned for her. As I checked the pockets for loose change, my fingers brushed against a crumpled piece of paper. I pulled it out and smoothed it over the kitchen island. It was a receipt for a luxury boutique hotel downtown. 2 nights. Paid in cash. Dated for the previous weekend, exactly when she claimed she was at a 2-day wellness retreat with her yoga group. My heart hammered against my ribs. I waited for her to get home from work, the receipt burning a hole in my pocket. When she walked through the door, humming happily, I didn't yell. I just placed the crumpled paper on the counter. Chloe, what is this? She glanced at the receipt, and for a terrifying moment, her face went completely blank. Then, the transformation happened. Her eyes filled with rapid, heavy tears. Her lower lip trembled. She didn't look guilty. She looked profoundly devastated. Liam, how could you? She whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. You ruined it. You completely ruined it. Ruined what? I asked, completely thrown off balance by her reaction. Why were you at a hotel? It was for your birthday, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I booked a consultation with that private chef you love. He only does meetings at the hotel restaurant. I was trying to organize a massive surprise dinner for you. I paid cash so you wouldn't see it on the joint credit card statement. And you went snooping through my things because you don't trust me. She collapsed onto the bar stool, weeping uncontrollably. Suddenly, I wasn't the betrayed husband holding the smoking gun. I was a paranoid, controlling monster who had just ruined a beautiful, thoughtful surprise. I spent the next 2 hours apologizing profusely, holding her tightly as she cried, begging for her forgiveness for my insane paranoia. I felt utterly disgusted with myself. She generously agreed to forgive me, but only if I promised to stop being so suspiciously toxic. She spun a brilliant web of lies, and I eagerly wrapped myself up in it. My birthday finally arrived. I woke up with a mix of guilt and anticipation, hoping the private chef surprise was still happening despite my snooping. Chloe kissed me on the cheek, handed me a wrapped box containing a nice but generic designer watch, and wished me a happy birthday. We went to a standard, local steakhouse for dinner. Just the 2 of us. There was no private chef. There was no grand surprise party. There was absolutely nothing. As we sat across from each other eating our steaks, she chattered endlessly about some drama at her office. I just stared at her. So, I interrupted quietly. The private chef couldn't make it? She didn't miss a beat. She sighed heavily, looking annoyed. I told you, Liam, after you ruined the surprise, I had to cancel it. I was just too upset to go through with the planning. You really spoiled the mood. She took a sip of her martini, completely unfazed. In that exact moment, the final veil dropped. I realized, with absolute, terrifying clarity, that she had played me. The tears, the outrage, the defensive posturing, it was all a masterful performance designed to make me doubt my own sanity. The grief hit me first, a physical blow to my chest that made it hard to breathe in the crowded restaurant. The woman I loved did not exist, but the grief was almost instantaneously followed by something else. A cold, hard, unyielding resolve settled over my heart, freezing the pain. I was done asking questions. I was done giving her the opportunity to gaslight me, manipulate me, and make me feel crazy. If she wanted to play games, I was going to change the rules entirely. You're right, I said evenly, offering her a calm, empty smile. I'm sorry I ruined it. This dinner is perfect. I drove us home in silence, pretending to listen to the radio. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was an investigator living behind enemy lines. I needed undeniable, concrete proof. I needed evidence that she couldn't cry her way out of. I stopped talking, and I finally started watching her every single move. The hunt for the devastating truth had officially begun inside my own home. The sheer anxiety of sneaking around your own home is indescribable. Every creak of the floorboards sounds like a gunshot. The next day, while Chloe was at work and supposedly hitting her gym class, I drove 3 towns over and bought 4 voice-activated, miniature audio recorders using cash. I strategically placed them where she spent the most time alone, under the passenger seat of her SUV, taped beneath her vanity desk, hidden in her walk-in closet, and tucked behind the books in her home office. But audio wasn't enough. I needed digital proof. Chloe was meticulous with her current phone, keeping it locked down like Fort Knox. However, she was less careful with her old devices. I remembered an old iPad we used to keep in the guest room. I dug it out of a storage bin in the basement. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely plug in the charging cable. When it powered on, I held my breath. It was still logged into her primary iCloud account. She hadn't bothered to wipe it when she upgraded her phone 2 years ago. I quickly disabled the Wi-Fi connection so the device couldn't sync and alert her that an old tablet had come online. I spent the next 6 hours downloading specialized recovery software onto my laptop, connecting the iPad, and desperately digging through the digital graveyard. I managed to extract gigabytes of supposedly deleted data, hidden photo albums, cached location data, and fragmented message logs from deleted apps. It was a tedious, agonizing process, sitting in the dark basement, constantly listening for the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. My adrenaline was spiking constantly. Every time I hit a roadblock with the software, I wanted to smash the screen. By 3 a.m., my eyes were burning, but I had successfully created a mirrored backup of her digital footprint. I safely disconnected the iPad and buried it back in the basement bin exactly as I had found it. I crept upstairs to our bedroom, slipping under the covers next to my sleeping wife. Tomorrow, I would start reviewing the mountain of evidence I had just successfully extracted. The following afternoon, I sat in my locked home office, staring at my laptop screen. I decided to start with the audio files retrieved from the recorder hidden in her walk-in closet. I plugged in my headphones, my stomach twisting into painful knots. The first few files were nothing, just the rustling of clothes, her humming along to the radio, the sounds of her getting ready for the day. Then, I clicked on a file dated 2 days ago, right around the time I usually left for work. There was a moment of silence, followed by the distinctive sound of her dialing a number. A few seconds later, her voice echoed in my ears, completely different from the tone she used with me. It was low, husky, and dripping with affection. "Hey, baby," Chloe purred into the phone. "Yeah, he just left. God, he's so clueless, it's actually pathetic." I stopped breathing. The devastating confirmation of the affair washed over me like ice water. Hearing the words out loud, hearing the mocking contempt in her voice, broke something fundamental inside my chest. "I know," she continued, laughing cruelly on the recording. "He bought that whole private chef story hook, line, and sinker." I almost felt bad for him, but then he apologized for ruining my surprise. He's so easy to manipulate. Anyway, I can't wait for tonight. Get the room at the Marriott again, the one with the huge tub. I'll tell him I have a late networking event for the firm. I paused the recording. My hands were trembling violently. I had known, deep down, that she was lying. But hearing her mock my trust, hearing her brag about how easily she deceived me to another man, was a uniquely agonizing type of torture. I took a sip of cold coffee, fighting the urge to throw my laptop through the window. I forced myself to press play again. I needed to hear every second of it. I needed to know exactly who was on the other end of that phone call, destroying my life. The identity of her lover was the one missing piece I desperately needed to find. I spent the next 3 days methodically cross-referencing the recovered iPad data with the dates and times mentioned in the audio recordings. I found a hidden folder buried in a dummy photo app on the iPad. It contained hundreds of screenshots of text messages. The contact name was simply saved as a single emoji, a black heart. The texts were brutally explicit. They detailed hotel meetups, complaints about me, and plans for a future together. I scoured the screenshots, desperately looking for a slip-up, a name, a clue. Finally, I found it. In a screenshot dated 6 months ago, the Blackheart contact had sent a photo of a flight confirmation for a business trip. The name on the ticket was partially cropped, but the phone number associated with the airline text alert was completely visible at the top of the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled out my own phone. I typed the 10 digits into my contacts search bar, praying it was a stranger. Praying it was someone I didn't know. The name populated on my screen instantly. It was Julian. The double betrayal crushed me with the force of a freight train. Julian, my business partner. The man who stood next to me at my wedding. The man who drank my scotch, ate at my table, and smiled in my face while secretly sleeping with my wife. The room spun wildly out of control. I stumbled to the adjoining bathroom and violently threw up everything in my stomach. I sat on the cold tile floor for an hour, gasping for air, tears of absolute rage streaming down my face. They had both played me for a fool. They had laughed at my expense while I worked myself to the bone for our company and our marriage. I slowly stood up, washed my face in the sink, and stared at my pale reflection in the mirror. The devastation was gone. Only pure, unadulterated hatred remained. I walked back to my desk and meticulously locked all the audio files, screenshots, and hotel receipts into a secure, encrypted cloud folder. They thought they were so clever, but they had absolutely no idea what was coming. With the encrypted folder secured, I sat in the terrifying silence of my office and evaluated my options. I could confront them right now. I could march down to Julian's office, throw the evidence on his desk, and demand a divorce from Chloe. But I knew exactly how they operated. They were both masterful manipulators. If I confronted them privately, they would spin the narrative. They would deny, deflect, and somehow try to make me look like the crazy, jealous husband who violated their privacy. They would control the fallout. I refused to let them control anything ever again. I glanced at the large calendar hanging on my wall. It was mid-November. In exactly 6 weeks, we were scheduled to host our annual, massive New Year's Eve party. It was the social event of our circle. Chloe obsessed over it for months, inviting 50 of our most influential friends, family members, and business colleagues. It was her night to shine, her stage to play the perfect, wealthy hostess, flaunting our supposedly flawless life to everyone in our affluent suburb. A dark, beautiful idea began to bloom in my mind. A private confrontation wouldn't provide the justice I craved. I needed a public execution. I needed an audience. I wanted every single person they knew, every person they cared about impressing, to see exactly who they truly were. I decided to build a trap so inescapable, so undeniably public, that neither of them would ever be able to show their faces in our town again. The plan required immense patience and a level of deception I didn't know I possessed. I had to become a better liar than my wife. I had to smile at my betrayers, break bread with them, and play the role of the happily ignorant husband for 6 more agonizing weeks. I began drafting a timeline on a secure notepad, noting technical requirements, gathering financial documents for the divorce lawyer I secretly retained, and mapping out the perfect execution. The countdown to midnight had officially started, and I was holding all the cards. The next 6 weeks were a psychological torture chamber. Faking a happy marriage while secretly planning its explosive demise required an agonizing amount of acting. I smiled through Thanksgiving dinner, carving the turkey while Julian sat at my table, his knee subtly pressing against Chloe's beneath the tablecloth. I wanted to drive the carving knife through his hand, but instead, I offered him more stuffing and smiled warmly. I suffered through Christmas morning, buying Chloe the expensive diamond tennis bracelet she had heavily hinted at. She cried fake tears of joy, wrapping her arms around my neck and telling me how much she loved me. I hugged her back, feeling nothing but profound disgust, counting the days until December 31st. The strain of the charade was immense, and the cracks almost showed. During a holiday cocktail party at our house, Chloe's younger sister, Sarah, pulled me aside into the kitchen. Sarah was grounded, fiercely loyal, and held a deep hatred for infidelity after a messy breakup of her own. She looked at me closely, her brow furrowed in genuine concern. "Liam, are you okay?" Sarah asked quietly, ensuring we were alone. "You look exhausted. And things between you and Chloe, they feel weird. Tense. Is everything all right with you guys?" I froze. Sarah was incredibly observant. If I told her the truth, she would explode and ruin the plan. If I lied poorly, she would keep digging. I forced a tired, convincing chuckle and rubbed my eyes. "I'm just really burned out, Sarah," I lied smoothly. "Julian and I are pushing hard on this new software launch for the company. The stress is bleeding over into the house. Chloe's been a saint dealing with my long hours. We're fine, I promise. Just need this year to end." Sarah studied my face for a long moment before finally nodding, accepting my excuse. "Okay, just make sure you take care of yourself, Liam. Don't let the business ruin your marriage." If she only knew that the business partner had already destroyed the marriage completely. December 30th arrived. The house was a chaotic flurry of caterers, florists, and decorators prepping for the massive NY bash. Chloe was completely distracted, barking orders and obsessing over the floral arrangements. I told her I needed to test the audiovisual equipment for the party to ensure the music and the midnight ball drop broadcast went flawlessly. I locked the living room doors and went to work. Our home was heavily integrated with smart tech, which usually annoyed me, but today, it was my greatest weapon. I took a hidden, dedicated laptop I had purchased specifically for this event and wired it directly into the central media hub behind the massive 85-inch smart TV and the drop-down projector screen. I bypassed the standard Wi-Fi inputs, ensuring that once the laptop was triggered, it would override any other remote control or network command in the house. Nobody could turn it off without physically ripping the cables out of the wall. Then, I sat on the floor and compiled the presentation. I called the file Resolutions, MP4-inch. It was a ruthlessly efficient slideshow. I started with a black screen and white text detailing dates and times. I added the high-resolution screenshots of their explicit text messages, making sure Julian's phone number and contact photo were prominently displayed. I integrated the audio clips, adding subtitles so the deafening party noise wouldn't mask their mocking voices. Finally, I added a damning sequence of screenshots from our own hidden Ring doorbell camera, showing Julian arriving at our house hours after I left for work and leaving hours later, looking disheveled. I synced the laptop to a small, wireless presentation remote that I slipped into my jacket pocket. I tested the trigger. The projector screen dropped, the TV flared to life, and their betrayal was broadcast in brilliant 4K resolution across my living room. I quickly killed the power and hid the laptop securely behind the heavy wooden media cabinet. The trap was finally set, loaded, and waiting for the perfect moment to spring. New Year's Eve night was a blur of flashing lights, loud music, and suffocating anxiety. By 10 p.m., over 50 guests had arrived. The living room was packed with our friends, Chloe's family, and several key investors from our tech firm. Waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Chloe was in her element, wearing that stunning silver dress, working the room with effortless charm. Julian arrived right on time, looking sharp in a tailored suit. He walked straight up to me, clamped a heavy hand on my shoulder, and smiled broadly. "Happy New Year, brother," Julian said, raising his glass of my expensive scotch. "To another wildly successful year for the firm, and to you and your beautiful wife." "To success," I replied, clinking my glass against his, my voice totally deadpan. The psychological toll of playing the perfect host one last time was almost unbearable, draining every ounce of my energy. I watched them interact from across the room. I watched Julian casually brush past her, his hand lingering on her waist. I watched Chloe shoot him a secret, knowing smile when she thought nobody was looking. Every fake laugh I forced, every handshake I gave, felt like swallowing broken glass. I kept my right hand firmly in my suit jacket pocket, my thumb resting gently on the small plastic button of the presentation remote. Sarah came up to me around 11:30 p.m., looking slightly tipsy and happy. "Great party, Liam. You guys really outdid yourselves this year." "Thanks, Sarah," I said, looking at my watch. "Just wait. The best part is still coming." As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the music swelled, and the energy in the room grew electric. People started handing out the stupid plastic top hats and noisemakers. I maneuvered my way through the crowded room, positioning myself directly next to the media cabinet, ensuring I had a clear line of sight to both the screens and my wife. I caught Chloe's eye across the room, and she blew me a quick, performative kiss. At exactly 11:58 p.m., the DJ lowered the music, and the crowd began to roar with anticipation. "All right, everyone," Chloe shouted, holding a crystal flute of champagne high in the air. "It's almost time. Liam, get the broadcast ready. We want to see the ball drop." "You got it, honey," I called back, my voice remarkably steady. I pressed the first button on the remote. The heavy, motorized projector screen slowly lowered from the ceiling, covering the large window. The 85-inch smart TV behind me powered on. I routed the audio through the massive surround sound system we had installed for movie nights. The room naturally gravitated toward the screens, 50 faces illuminated by the standby glow, drinks raised, smiles wide, completely ready to welcome the new year. Julian stepped up right behind Chloe, standing intimately close, wrapping his arm around her waist under the guise of the crowded room. He looked at me and gave me a slight, arrogant nod, completely oblivious to his impending doom. Chloe beamed, surrounded by her sister, her parents, and all of our friends. She looked absolutely triumphant, completely confident in the flawless illusion she had curated. I took a deep breath, feeling my pulse thunder in my ears. The agonizing wait, the months of gaslighting, the sickening audio recordings, the nausea, the fake smiles, it all culminated in this single, heavy moment. I looked at Sarah, who was smiling eagerly at the screen. I looked at Julian, who was sipping my scotch. Finally, I locked eyes directly with Chloe. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just stared at her with a cold, dead expression until her smile slightly faltered in confusion. The crowd started chanting in unison, their voices echoing loudly in the large room. 10, 9, 8, 7. They thought they were counting down to a brand new year filled with hope and promise. 6, 5, 4. I pressed the center button on the remote. Instead of the bright lights of Times Square and a glittering ball, the screens flashed black. A massive, jarring title card appeared in stark white text, "Chloe and Julian, a year in review." The crowd's chanting stumbled and died instantly. A profound, confused silence fell over the room. The presentation autoplayed. First, a crystal-clear, high-definition video filled the screens. It was security footage I had pulled from the luxury boutique hotel downtown. It showed Chloe and Julian walking into the lobby, holding hands, and kissing passionately by the elevators. The timestamp in the corner read October 28th, the exact weekend of her supposed wellness retreat. Before anyone could process the video, the screen split. On the left side, massive, scrolling screenshots of their explicit text messages appeared. Julian's contact photo and phone number were completely undeniable. On the right side, the audio recordings began to blare through the massive surround sound system. Chloe's mocking, cruel voice echoed off the walls. "God, he's so clueless, it's actually pathetic. He bought that whole private chef story hook, line, and sinker. I'll tell him I have a late networking event for the firm." The silence in the room was absolute, suffocating terror. Nobody breathed. Sarah dropped her champagne glass. It shattered loudly on the hardwood floor, but nobody looked away from the screens. The evidence was irrefutable, aggressively loud, and publicly humiliating. I watched the color completely drain from Julian's arrogant face, leaving him a sickening shade of pale gray. Chloe let out a horrifying, guttural gasp, her hands flying to her mouth as she stumbled backward away from Julian. Her parents looked absolutely mortified, hiding their faces. The investors from our firm were staring at Julian with undisguised disgust. The perfect, flawless illusion was completely annihilated in front of 50 witnesses. The video looped, her mocking laughter echoing again as pure chaos finally erupted. Pandemonium broke out. Julian didn't even try to defend himself. He looked at the investors, looked at my completely cold, unfeeling face, and literally sprinted for the front door, abandoning his coat and running out into the freezing snow. Chloe collapsed onto the floor, sobbing hysterically, screaming my name over the booming sound of her own voice playing on the speakers. Sarah knelt beside her, not to comfort her, but to angrily demand if the dates on the screen were real. The partygoers scrambled for their coats, awkwardly whispering and fleeing the toxic fallout of my living room. I walked calmly over to my terrified, weeping wife. I reached into my inner suit pocket, pulled out a thick, legally binding manila envelope, and dropped it directly into her lap. "Happy New Year, Chloe," I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. "You have 30 days to vacate my house. My lawyer will contact yours on Monday." The legal aftermath was brutal but swift. With the undeniable proof of infidelity and the public humiliation, Chloe signed the incredibly favorable divorce settlement without a fight. I bought out Julian's shares in the company for pennies on the dollar after the investors threatened to pull their funding if he remained attached to the firm. He was ruined professionally and socially. It's been over a year since that night. Rebuilding my life wasn't easy. Betrayal leaves a deep, ugly scar that therapy can only do so much to fade. There were nights I woke up in a cold sweat, still feeling the ghost of her gaslighting. But as time passed, the cold calculation melted away, leaving a solid core of self-respect. I learned that you cannot control how people treat you, but you maintain absolute power over how you respond. I survived by dragging the truth out of the shadows and into the blinding light.